interrupt? Yeah, and just my favorite part of the excerpts that we read were the part where I believe you were referencing another scholar, and I can't remember who it was, maybe Ellsworth, who talks about, you know, the whole point of pedagogy is to have that experience of the eureka moment, that pedagogy isn't anything but being in the now and the here, and having that realization. For me, it's always about connection. You know, I remember when I was an undergraduate, and one day I was in class and I realized, shit, like all my classes are teaching me the same thing. How many of you had that experience as an undergrad? And like for me, that was the moment where I was like, oh, this is what college is about. Like this is that very moment. And so as a teacher, I always struggle to figure out how to try to create space for my students to have that moment. And so as we're starting to move toward wrapping up here, I wonder if we might not take a few minutes, do some more writing, and think about either that moment that we experienced or how we as teachers can try to make that moment happen for our students, and then sort of share out so that we can get some. Is that too? Is that
no? It's daunting. I don't know. I still don't know the answer to that.
It is daunting. I mean, I don't know that any of us know the answer, but isn't that what we're here to?
Right.
That's the joy, right? Is recognizing that we don't know, and and that part's the fun part. And we'll try to do as chapter 2 is entitled, right? What's the title of chapter 2? Joining the development means joining the community, and that's all there is to know. Yeah. So that's what we'll try to do in the last 15 minutes. And it doesn't matter what we come up with.
How do we trigger these eurekas, and how do we get to
or about the narrative of our own eureka moment, if we can't think about how.
Sure.
Maybe out of those narratives we can come up with something. one more minute. Wrapping up that last sentence. Let's start with you, and then we'll just work our way down the table. And you can either share what you came up with, or maybe comment on what someone before you said, or pass, whatever is most comfortable.
Well, I guess I'm still working on having that eureka moment myself, and that's what I was so startled by. I was like, well, maybe I haven't had it yet. And maybe I'm a passive learner, but I think I'm more excited about seeing those eureka moments in students. Oh. You know, when I see that they're making these connections, or they have this sense of otherness, or, you know, where they make connections that I haven't already made, or where they teach me something. So.
Good, thank you. Alice?
Yeah, I was trying to think through those and trying to come up with a specific memory of, it seems like maybe I had the opposite experience, that there were many there wasn't like everything now makes sense, but like lots of little moments where, this thing has something to do with this other thing, or I can make this thing have something to do with this other thing, which was maybe the more interesting one, was when I realized that college could just be a way, like it's an excuse to think about things. And that there weren't specific things that I had to think about, and there weren't specific objects that I had to think about, which I think was just part of my experience of cultural studies, too. I think that was maybe it.
That's good. Thank you.
This isn't quite a eureka moment, but yesterday, actually, I was realizing we were studying the power of sympathy in one of our classes, and in another class we're studying Plato's Republic. And all of a sudden, at one point yesterday, it just kind of hit me that in a way, they're both about how strong and how powerful writing is and how dangerous it could potentially be. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I realized we're having almost the same conversation as a class, but in two totally separate subjects.
I had the exact same moment. Yesterday, I was in class, I was thinking about Plato's Republic and how we're studying that in Professor McCown's class. You talked about Plato as the first totalitarian, and that was last Thursday, and then yesterday we were talking about power of sympathy, and I was thinking about utopia and community building and how that's not it's not very separate from this conversation of the ideal classroom and how we teach, and so it all kind of comes together in that weird way.
I made my connection, I think, around junior year of undergrad when I was English and political science. So as I was taking these English classes, focusing on these books that were talking about trauma, at the same time I was taking a class on politics of immigration, and so kind of applying the fictionalized accounts of the trauma the characters are experiencing in whatever novel we were reading in comparison with the real-life trauma that millions of people are facing every day when they're immigrating from Latin America to the United States. And we were having the same conversation in different ways.
I am like Sam and Sam. I kind of noticed this probably Tuesday night when we were actually talking about stuff that we had learned last semester, and then I made the connection that, actually last semester, by the end of the semester, all of our classes, we were having the same conversations about, conversations about trauma theory, we were having conversations about storytelling and how that happens, and oral cultures, and even about utopias, and it was in every single class, from the 18th century to today. And I like realized that like this semester I've already started doing that, like actively thinking about, well, how can I connect this to another class, and like bringing things in. What did we talk about yesterday, and is that like still on my mind? And I just noticed that that's something that you just kind of do at a certain point. It's like once you make that connection, you always do it with every class. And then, you know, then I was thinking, I've probably always been doing this. Not always, but like there probably was a moment in, you know, some undergrad class or some high school class that I just didn't even realize, and it just happened, and then I started building on it. And so, I mean, I don't know if I can identify that, but
That's good.
maybe I had like a late eureka about a previous one.
Sorry, I haven't really got anything to add to that.
That's good. That's good. Thank you.
I think I'll start off by saying, I'll just be completely honest, I never had a eureka moment as a college student at all. I think I was more maybe too much discourse of the master, and never really had those eureka moments at all because I wasn't really connecting. And so I think all I would have to add is, as a teacher, when I've noticed, I've had students, every semester I always have someone that will say to me, like, all my classes are about the same thing, or everything we're talking about. And when I find that, it's always one of two things that's happening. Is we're always talking about something kind of general, you know, something like, you know, what does good mean? What does happy mean? These kind of large umbrella concepts that they can kind of imprint themselves more into, and that's when they start having those moments. But the other one is also kind of along those general lines, is when we talk more about what it means to think, what it means to have ideas, the more generalized structures of thought. That's when they start to realize, oh, it's really all the same thing. What I'm doing in economics is actually the same that I'm doing in bio, and the same that I'm doing in this class. And I actually talk about Socrates and failure and the torpedo fish and all those things that he talks about in his text. And it's always around that moment in one of my classes when my students get those eureka moments, when they realize it's okay to fail, and somehow that triggers something. Not having had it for myself, at least not early, I'm still trying to figure out how that happens.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't ever have that eureka moment. I guess all my classes were the same. So I guess I misunderstood. I was writing down how I try to foster those moments.
Oh, good. No, that's excellent. Tell us the secrets to the universe, please.
And remembering how I experienced those moments in specific situations. And I guess I also maybe wrongly associate these kinds of this eureka with the humanities specifically. That might be a prejudice of mine. So, I mean, I remember just, you know, it's simple stuff that we do in composition class, dialoguing with others. I mean, I remember that from graduate school, like talking to other students about whatever we're working on would produce ideas I wouldn't have, just, you know, talking to the professor, writing things, relating personal narrative to abstract academic discourse. Play, like in a general sense, it applies to all those things I just discussed. So the importance of fostering play in various ways, and also, which I guess some of you have mentioned, is from our 1010 class, looking at one thing through the lens of another, seeing things out of context, you know, as a way of discovering something new, something you've been looking at already. So that's all.
I also didn't really have a eureka moment. I don't know. In the UK, we don't have the same plethora of multiple subjects going on, so I was very focused on very one specific thing. So cultural studies and interdisciplinary research in graduate school was probably when I was like, everything's connected. But for my students, using Twitter has helped so far. I've only just started using it in class, but so far the students have been there'll be a flurry of tweets from all of them who were in their psychology class right after mine. They're talking about the same thing we talked about. Classes everywhere. And it also helps that we're talking about gender and sexuality, because they recognize things happening in interactions with their friends, and they'll tweet about I want, a guy tweeting, I want to go have a pumpkin spice latte, but he was too embarrassed to order it because he was a guy. Just that recognition, and he did not order the latte. And he did not know what to, apparently that's a gender one. So they will recognize the things in their own lives, bring that to the classroom, apply it to their readings, and apply the readings to their lives, and then go to their next class and realize, in a strange way, their other classes legitimize what we do in our class. So there's this sort of multiple directional thing happening, which I've found that they really appreciate, and they realize it's relevant to their life and to the rest of their education.
Good. That's really good.
I have also had these kind of content-related eureka moments in my classes in undergrad and graduate school as well. But I guess when you were speaking about the eureka moment, I was thinking more about the sort of skills and abilities that have been cultivated by my classes. And what has prepared me to enter this program at Tulane, and I guess especially beginning graduate school, I've just been thinking a lot about more what has each class taught me in common that's going to prepare me to do what I want to do in the future. So that was more of my eureka moment, is that all these classes are teaching me these different skills that I can use in the future. So I don't know if that's quite what you
that's
meant,
good. That's really good.
Well, I was also thinking about fostering the eureka moments, and in undergrad I studied gender and sexuality studies, so it was like constant eureka moments. Like, oh my gosh, this social justice theory has everything to do with my life. I had no idea about justice at all, and as it turns out, race is a thing, like every single day. And this chapter 2 talks about identifying with the community and like sort of a process of identification. And in undergrad with gender studies, I don't know if we identified with a community that was already there, but we more like built a community because we were like sad and then outraged, and then we would like have to go have a party and then read some more stuff that made us really sad, and then get back to the classroom and have a conversation, keep on doing it. So these chapters really get it right, I think, about like taking it personally and getting connected and like forming emotions about subject matter. Sort of like, I don't know, if like you can get angry about something, all of a sudden it becomes everywhere.
So I'm the kind of person that thinks through these ideas through examples. So I was thinking about a really small scale eureka moment that I try to cultivate in a class I teach. I have my students look at several maps of New Orleans. So, Google Maps and like highway maps, tourist maps. I found a few like wedding destination maps that just have marked out spots like where people are going for the wedding events. And so when we talk about them, they'll say things like, oh, this one looks much more factual. This one looks like it's from a fairy tale. It's like, fictional. And so they want to say these different things. And one of the things I'm trying to foster in them is an understanding that actually all of these things are making choices, rhetorical choices. What you include and what you exclude are deliberate ideological choices. And so these are in fact the same. Like as fictional as you think this is, they all are that fictional. Or as factual as you think this is, they're all in fact that factual. So just showing them that rhetoric is kind of what generates our knowledge.
So I had a kind of eureka moment in undergrad in the library. I'm not exactly sure when. It wasn't so much that my courses are all teaching me the same thing, or basically because I knew they were teaching critical thinking, maybe in different ways, but the critical thinking was the basis. But I realized that I could use the library to do whatever I wanted. I could research anything, I could find out anything I wanted, and that it was a resource among other resources I had at the university, which included my professors, which included administrative staff, and so that whatever I wanted to do, there were resources out in the world that I could use, right? And then in grad school, I started to really want to enable other people to achieve their goals by using my resources and showing them that they could also use those resources. So I always require my students to go to the library in every class, no matter what level it is, because I just transparently say you can find out whatever you want to find out, and you can't find it out, write it yourself. So I try to be just transparent about that, and then this is a great conversation. It's really making me think about other ways that we can facilitate that kind of discovery for our students.
Great, yeah. I mean, the connection between things, the language is power. Really like what you said about, everything is kind of fiction and we just invest it and view it with power.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say that the things I've been working on with my course, and which relate heavily with TR's book, is just the using what you know as a launch pad for what you don't know, and continuing that cycle over and over, and getting my students to recognize that, like, that all this business of persuasion is really slippery, and that there's always going to be people left unpersuaded, and why, and asking those kinds of questions: what's missing, what could be different, I think is imbuing them with the sense that they can challenge what's known and how it's known. And I hope, that they challenge themselves that way, that they go beyond where their starting point, because they realize how vast that space is, but also how exciting.
So I was pretty nervous when you posed this question because I'd never had a eureka moment, and then we would go around the room, and a lot of people admit that they never had one either. So that made me feel a lot better about not having one. But just something that maybe you guys might find useful is I don't blame my family, but I think just, every time I go home,
of course it's the family.
Yeah. I just get bombarded with all these questions like, what was your favorite class this semester? What was your favorite book you read? And they always it's like that accountability. They always want to see something that I've learned. They want to like know that I'm taking something away each semester. And it's hard for me to answer those questions. I always have to come up with something kind of like arbitrary, I feel like, just to get these family members out of my face so I can relax and enjoy being home. But yeah, I always feel like I don't want to answer that question. I want to have two favorite things that I learned this semester. I want to like everything that I've studied. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure to kind of boil it down to one thing. And that's hard for me to do.
That's good.
I was thinking, mine is very much like Teresa's, and also like Patience's. I was in the library. I was a college freshman. I remember this very vividly. College freshman, had to do a research paper. I'm in the library. It was like a spring day. I was like dreading all this drudgery that was in front of me. I got to write a 10-page paper. Oh my God! And I began, fiddling, pulling a book off the shelf and going to it, and starting to get really into it, and beginning to see that this was not work; it was a form of play. That the library is a playground. You should resource. And I was like, yeah, I was less responsible. I think I was just like, this stuff is fun. In a way that I just, today we say kind of geeking out on stuff and nerding out on it. That's exactly what I was doing. I discovered that academic work isn't work. It's a form of play. And that it can be, that no matter how much of it there is or how daunting or intimidating the task in front of you, it's really fun. And if there's certain professors that you've had that have kind of modeled that for you, that you can identify for. I must have had, I don't remember the prof that semester, but I must have had someone who was really into it and thought that the work was really fun, and somehow that got kind of grafted onto me, and I've never looked back. The fun never stops. And that was my eureka, I guess.
All right, I have not had one either, but what I've had is a moment of failure in the way that you described. That was integrated into the class. So I took a theory class as an undergrad, and it was difficult theory. But the professor stood up at the beginning and said, you may not get this now, or this year, or this month, but in 2 years you will sit there and you'll say, yes, I understand now what all this was about. And it did sink in later. It didn't come or the knowledge didn't come across that year or that month, but really it was exactly as she had said. So
that's good. Well, I guess I'll be the last one, and then we'll wrap. But I was thinking about the disconnection that you talk about, and about how I think that the teachers and the people in my life whom I've enjoyed being around the least are the ones who are too eager to tell me what the connections are and tell me the answer. And the teachers and the people whom I like the most are the ones who just put a lot of dots out there and expect me to figure it out, or don't even put the dots, just like create space for the problem to happen. And that to be good teachers, I think we really need to create disconnection in the classroom so that students can experience that feeling of connection. And I think that the way to do that are a lot of the ways that you guys have talked about today, which is, creating opportunities for discovery, creating opportunities for play. As teachers, I think we need to remember that we may know the answer, but our job is not to tell the answer, but to create space for students to discover the answer for themselves, so that they can know the joy and that feeling of wonder and the delight of looking at the edge of our knowledge and then watching that expand exponentially in front of us, and just how I've just never felt more alive than in those moments of intellectual sort of, I don't even know what to call it. I don't even know if maybe in psychoanalysis it has a name, but that feeling, that experience is the most delightful experience I've ever had. It's what turned me on way back when. It's what still turns me on today. And those teachers who are too willing to always give the answer are not going to turn their students on, I don't think. At least they never turned me on.
I feel like that's what you were saying about agency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To create a space for agency on the student's part, you have to allow for that failure. It seems like that's kind of what you're speaking to.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, listen, it's 4:58. We were supposed to end at 4:45. Before you go, though, because we do live in this evil age of assessment in which we have to count things and give numbers, Lindsay and I really want to do this again, and in order to do it again, we need to know how you guys felt about it. So would you mind taking 2 minutes and filling out the survey that we have? We would really appreciate it before you leave. And if you want to hang around out, we're supposed to get up to the room at 5, right, Peter? Outside, we can sort of chat and shake hands and hug and cry it out or whatever needs to happen.
And grad students definitely stick around. Grad students are on the hook for another hour. So grad students, we'll just, as we wrap up here, let's meet right out here in those chairs, kind of in the central part of the building, what I'm talking about. And we'll just, with us, that little kind of conversation area is, we'll meet there to do another 45 minutes or so. That's okay.
Yes, as Ali said, we definitely want to do this again. And overall, did you all find it helpful, interesting? Yeah, definitely be honest. They're anonymous, so we don't know any of you, so we can't track you down by your writing at all. So feel free to be honest. Sorry. Did you get it? Yeah. Cool.